Hey everyone, welcome back. We get a lot of questions from people just starting to learn English,
Hmm.
and one that keeps coming up is like, how do you actually get fluent? Not just, textbook stuff.
Right, right.
So we're doing a deep dive today into how your brain learns to think in a new language.
Yeah, that's the key, isn't it? It's more than just words, it's how you use them.
Exactly. And the source material we're looking at makes a really strong case that thinking in English, like literally in your head, it's way more powerful than just memorizing.
Well, absolutely. Like you can know a ton of vocab, but if you're still translating everything in your head, it's slow, it's clunky.
And it's exhausting.
Oh, for sure. Your
Yes.
brain's working overtime.
Which is one of the benefits they highlight. So the source starts with, why think in English? And for anyone new to the language, this is going to be eye-opening.
I remember when it clicked for me. It was like a whole different world.
Right. So benefit number one, and this is huge, no more mental translation. Imagine you're chatting with someone, and you don't have to go English to your language back to English in your
You
head.
just think the thought and it comes out.
Exactly. So much faster, less awkward pauses.
And the source points out there's actually brain science behind this. Like translation uses different areas than just thinking in the language directly.
It's like taking the scenic route versus the highway, right?
Perfect analogy. And it impacts like everything. The source talks about how comprehension improves too.
Oh yeah, it's not just about speaking, it's understanding what you hear, what you read, all that.
Because your brain's not playing catch up anymore.
Okay, so we're sold on the why. Now the fun part. How do we actually train our brains to do this?
Well, luckily, this source doesn't just tell you it's great, it gives you practical stuff.
Yes. Starting super simple, which I love because it means anyone listening can start today.
Absolutely. You don't need to be some language whiz.
Okay, so one of my favorites, it's called object naming. Ready? You just look around you wherever you are right now, and you name things in English.
So basic, but so brilliant.
Right? Like chair, table, phone, whatever you see. The source says it forces your brain to make that direct link, object to word, no translation, middleman.
Cutting out that extra step is what starts to rewire things.
And what's cool is, even if you don't know the word for something, the source says, describe it.
Ah, so instead of getting stuck, you're still thinking in English, just working around the gap.
Exactly. Like if you don't know microwave, you say, the thing that makes food hot quickly, it proves you in the right mindset.
And that fluency muscle is getting a workout.
Building on that, there's the daily object challenge, which I love because it makes it a habit.
Consistency, right. That's what the brain needs.
Yep. So 5 new words per day, just from stuff you see around, and review yesterday's words. The source is big on this. Little bits daily rather than cramming.
It's like small sips of water all day keep you hydrated better than chugging a gallon.
Perfect way to put it. So we're naming things, but how do we get to like full thoughts in English?
Well, the source moves on to sentences, but again starts super basic, present tense actions.
Oh, I remember this from the book. It's kind of funny. Like, I am walking, the dog is barking.
We don't usually narrate our lives, but it's like mental gym for the language part of your brain.
And the source uses present tense on purpose, right? Like, it's the building block.
Exactly. You master that, then past tense, future tense, it all builds from there.
Okay, so we're getting somewhere. Starting to sound less like a textbook and more like...
Like how we actually use language.
Right. And the cool thing is, the source goes beyond just the basics. But for part one, let's leave folks with this. Even just object naming 5 minutes a day can make a difference.
It's planting the seed, so to speak, and from there.
Well, stay tuned for part two. We'll get into some seriously cool brain hacks from the source.
Stuff you can use right away.
Exactly. So until then, happy English thinking, everyone. All right. So last time we were talking about how powerful it is to actually think in English, not just translate in your head.
And we left off with those simple exercises like naming objects around you.
Which, by the way, if you haven't tried yet, seriously, give it a go. But the source we're looking at doesn't stop there. Oh, no.
It gets even cooler because they move on to like, how do you actually use this in your life?
Not just random words, but thoughts, plans, all that.
Exactly. So, picking up where we left off, they give these practical daily exercises, and the name says it all. It's like stuff you can start doing today.
And I got to say, some of them are really clever. I was like, ooh, I'm stealing that.
Right. So simple, but you can tell they're based on how the brain actually learns.
Okay, so first one, this is great for morning people, morning planning. Basically, instead of, thinking about your day in your native language, you do it in English,
So like, I will go to the store later, I need to call so-and-so, that kind of stuff.
but in English. And the source points out, this does double duty. You're practicing future tense.
Which is tricky for a lot of layers.
For sure. But also, it ties into goal setting, which even outside of language, like when you say your goals out loud, they become more real.
More likely to actually happen.
Exactly. So win-win, you're thinking in English and getting stuff done.
Love it. Now, the next one, this might feel silly at first, but stick with me. It's called self-talk sessions.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
Basically, we all have that voice in our head, right? Like our thoughts, even if we're not saying them out loud.
Sometimes I wish I could turn mine off.
Haha, yeah, some days. But the idea here is you switch that voice to English.
So instead of thinking, I'm tired, it's, I am so tired, but in English.
Precisely. And it can be anything, like describing what you're doing, I am watching the dishes, or even the source suggests like imaginary conversations.
Oh, that's interesting. Like practice arguments in your head, but in English.
Why not? It's all getting your brain used to forming those thoughts using the right words.
It's like mental rehearsal for real life, almost.
Right. And the more you do it, the less weird it feels and the more natural English becomes.
Okay, I'm sold. This next one, though, this is super practical, especially for beginners.
Oh, yeah, scenario practice. This one's a lifesaver.
So the source says, imagine yourself in common situations, ordering food, asking for directions, stuff you actually do.
But you pre-play it in your head, in English.
So like, I'm mentally at the coffee shop. I would like a large latte, please.
And you can even think through different variations, like, what if they ask if I want almond milk? You've got the answer ready.
It's like having cheat codes for real life. The source even gives sample phrases.
So you're not starting from scratch, which can be intimidating.
Makes those situations way less scary when they actually happen.
Right. You're prepared because your brain's already been there, done that in English.
Okay, but what about, and I know everyone listening has felt this, what about when your brain blanks? You know the word, but it's just gone.
Oh, the dreaded tip of the tongue moment.
Exactly. Thankfully, the source has a whole section on handling unknown words, and it's super reassuring.
Because it happens to everyone, even native speakers.
For sure. But what I love is their description strategy. Like, instead of panicking, you just describe the thing.
Which, again, proves you're thinking in English, you're just working around the gap in vocab.
So instead of stapler, the thing that puts metal pieces through paper to hold them together.
A bit clunky, but hey, you got your point across. And the source says, over time, as you learn more words, you'll need to do that less and less.
It's like a stepping stone to real fluency.
Exactly. Now, we could talk all day about the source's vocab building tips, flashcards, apps, all that.
Right, but you got to stay focused because the thinking part is what lays the foundation.
It's like you can have the best tools, but if you don't know how to build, the house ain't happening.
Perfect analogy. So where does all this lead? Well, the source takes it up a notch.
To what they call, and I love this, brain boss mode.
Oh yeah, this is where it gets really interesting. Brain boss mode. It sounds intense.
It is in a good way. It's like once you got the basics, the source is saying, hey, you can think in English about anything.
Even like complicated stuff. Feelings, opinions, all that.
Exactly. And they have these advanced practice techniques, but the point is it's not out of reach. It's just the next level.
Okay, so what kind of stuff are we talking about?
So one that stood out to me, it's called detailed day descriptions. And it's basically like, imagine telling someone about your day, but in your head, all in English.
Oh, that's interesting. Not just like I went to work, I ate lunch, but more like
The whole story, right? What you felt, what you thought, using past tenses, descriptive words, the whole 9 yards.
that sounds challenging, but I could see how it would like push you to use everything you've learned.
And that's the source's point. They're saying, look, this is where thinking in English can take you. It's not just about surviving basic conversations.
It's about expressing yourself fully, like you would in your native language.
Exactly. Now, obviously, this takes time, practice, all that, but the source is big on giving you ways to, like, track your progress so you don't get discouraged.
Because I think that's a big thing for learners, right? Like, how do I know if I'm actually getting better at this whole thinking in English thing?
For sure. And the source has some really practical advice. First off, keep a journal, like, literally write down what you're practicing, how it felt.
So you can actually see your progress, like, oh, wow, a month ago I could only name 5 things. Now I can describe my whole morning routine.
Exactly. And another thing they recommend, recording yourself speaking English. I know, it can be cringy at first.
Oh, yeah, nobody likes hearing your own voice.
But it's the best way to catch those little things. Like, are you still pausing a lot? Is your pronunciation improving?
You become more aware of what you need to work on.
And then over time, you listen back and you're like, whoa, I sound so much more fluent.
It's like concrete proof that the brain stuff is working.
Right. And then finally, the source talks about goal setting, which we touched on before, but they suggest making weekly goals.
So like this week, I'm going to learn 10 new words related to cooking or something like that.
Exactly. And the source says, make it a mix, new words and new expressions. So you're pushing yourself beyond just single words.
Like leveling up in a video game, almost.
Kind of. but the best part is it keeps you motivated because you have those little wins along the way.
So, big picture, what we've learned today is that thinking in English, it's not some magical talent. It's a skill.
A skill that anyone can develop with the right approach.
And this source we've been talking about, it's packed with actionable stuff. Like we just scratched the surface.
But hopefully it's given everyone listening a place to start. Like, pick one thing we talked about and try it this week.
Even 5 minutes a day. That consistency, that's what makes the difference.
And remember, mistakes are part of the process. Don't be afraid to sound silly at first.
That's how you learn. So, to wrap things up, I just want to say, for anyone out there who's dreamed of being fluent in English, thinking in the language, it's like a secret weapon.
It unlocks a whole new level.
And now that you know it's possible, how cool is that? You're literally rewiring your brain. How amazing is that?
The brain is incredible. So, yeah, I think that's a great place to leave it. It's up to you now. What will you do with this knowledge?
That's right. We've given you the tools. Now go forth and think in English. Happy learning, everyone.